Should MLB players be taking half their salary or their full salary this season? Let's talk about it. So the main reason I wanted to address this whole situation is because I actually recently recorded a video about MLB player contracts and whether players were making way too much money, or like basically the problems that I see with MLB contracts, like player contracts as they exist today. This topic is very closely tied into it, so I wanted to kind of address all of the differences between these two arguments and my opinions on the Blake Snell situation, because it does kind of throw in a monkey wrench to the arguments I made in the other video. Essentially what's happening is Rays pitcher Blake Snell is having a huge problem with the 50-50 pay cut that players are going to be taking this season, as the season has basically been halved. Apparently Blake Snell live streamed his opinions on the whole scenario. I didn't even know Blake Snell live streamed, but yeah, he live streamed what he thought on, I guess, Twitch or whatever. So I'm going to play a little bit of what he had to say right here.
If I'm going to play, I should be getting the money I signed to be getting paid. I should not be getting half of what I'm getting paid because the season's cut in half. Imagine how much I'm actually making to play. You know what I'm saying? Like, I ain't making shit. And on top of that, so all that money's gone. And now I play risking my life. If I get the Rona, guess what happens with that? Oh yeah, that's in my body forever. That damage is not going to be like, the damage that was done to my body, that's going to be there forever.
He's basically going to be taking a 50% pay cut already because the season is halved. And then he mentions an additional 33% cut of the half already there. So he's actually going to be getting around 25% of his revenue.
I should not be getting half of what I'm getting paid because the season's cut in half, on top of a 33% cut of the half that's already there. So I'm really getting like 25%. On top of that, it's getting taxed.
I don't know what he means about the 33% pay cut. I don't know what that is personally. I only saw about the halved pay cut that the MLB had introduced. So essentially he's saying he's getting paid, and then that money is going to be getting taxed as well. So the amount of money that he's going to be making based on his, I think it was around $7 to $7.5 million salary he was supposed to get, is going to be basically negligible, and he's not going to be making barely like anything compared to his original salary for this season. And not only that, he brings up the point that playing baseball right now would be risking his life because teams travel so much and they're going to be interacting with, other teams, and baseballs are freaking touched by everyone on the field, that he's going to be risking his life to be making that money. He also mentions the damage it would do to his body, and yeah, it is actually a very serious disease, like people are dying from it. So I understand the concern there, but I don't understand what the problem is with him just saying, this was the amount that was promised in my contract, why am I not getting it? Like, again, I am not a medical professional, but I don't know the validity of, like, when you get a virus, is it like forever in you? Like, no, I thought what happens is you get it and then your body builds an immunity to it, and that's how you overcome it. So like, maybe you can get it if it mutates in the future, but you have the antibody. So apparently, like, I've heard from people say that, like, people are saying, like, if you get it, you're actually better off because then you get the antibodies. But again, I don't know. I'm not a freaking doctor. I'm the guy making YouTube videos in his bedroom. But anyways, let's get to what I think about the situation. I think personally, it's tricky because, teams are making the argument that they can't afford to basically put a team out there with nobody in their ballpark. They can't afford it without the ticket sales, without, the stadium concessions and everything, without all that profit. They can't afford these freaking 250, million or 200 million or $170 million payrolls on their teams. They can't afford them. Funny enough, now you know what teams like the Rays and the freaking Athletics feel like. They never have anyone in their ballparks, and they still have to put a team of 25 players on there. Bigger teams are starting to realize, like, what smaller teams have to deal with. But anyways, that's a, like, kind of a fair argument. But the thing is like, you signed a contract, and the contracts that you stated said that these players were owed a certain amount of money. Like, you gave your word that this is what you were going to pay the guy, and now you're just going to give him a 50% pay cut for something that's completely out of his control. Like, that is kind of ridiculous, I have to admit. So this article that I found says that Snell's salary is going to be reduced to $3.5 million based on the original deal that was made on the 26th of March. Now, someone, I forget who it was, someone made a good point on a video I saw, I think on Instagram. I'm gonna have to see if I can find that clip and just kind of reference it.
I also think everybody needs to understand the optics of millionaires saying, woe is me. When you have first responders on the front lines, when you have grocery store workers working for $10 an hour and they're still going out there, nobody wants to hear about a multimillionaire who says, I don't want to pitch for $1.5 million instead of 10.
And it's just hard to sympathize with a millionaire who's coming out and saying, oh, I'm making 3.5 million instead of 7 million, and he's complaining. When you think about it, there's so many frontline workers that have been working since the beginning of the pandemic and making way less more money than this guy who's sitting there with, all these like shoes on like, a freaking like bench above him. It's like, come on, man. And then he goes to talk about how he's risking his life to play when, there's nurses and people in grocery stores working with the general public every day who are, I feel like, much more at risk to getting the virus than an athlete. And again, they're making so much less money. It's just ridiculous. And I understand why people are having a hard time sympathizing with Blake. You're arguing the difference between making $7 million and $3.5 million. Like, that's an incredibly great salary to already have. And this is a point I made in the other video, which is talking about MLB contracts, is that players are complaining that, I'm not making enough money when they're making $9 million or like $12 million a year because they want $20 million instead. This is a completely different situation. This is the case of like, I signed a contract that stated you were gonna pay me this much, per year. And now you're not gonna give me that money simply because a virus happened that I can't control. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. I mean, and also, I have to admit, I have a little bit of a soft spot for this because, I left a job about, 3 months ago and I still haven't got my final paycheck. But you know what? It's all right. It's all good, man. But then again, you have to think if teams really can't afford to be paying players, their full salaries without people in the ballpark, it kind of goes to show you like how incredibly inflated MLB contracts and how much teams are spending, total salaries, how much that has like become inflated. This is kind of why I'm arguing that players should not be making $30 million a year because, this is why no one can afford tickets anymore. This is why people can only go to one game a year. It's like I understand like being an athlete is hard. You have to put a ton of training into it and it's incredibly hard to even hit a baseball or be able to make it to the MLB with all the competition, but still, it also kind of ruins it for the fans because you can only, a normal person can only afford to go to a game about once a year. And, my dad mentioned something that was to the effect of people would say all the time, when they're at the ballpark, they say, I'm gonna see everything today because I can't afford to come back. They have to go to all the museums, see every single attraction there. They have to take a tour of the stadium from top to bottom because they cannot afford to come back next year, or maybe even 2 years down the line. Something I didn't even consider is literally the fact that he is saying that he doesn't want to play.
Yeah, man, I gotta get my money. I'm not playing unless I get mine.
That he's considering not playing unless he gets the full cut of his money. The reason why I've never thought about it is because baseball players usually don't do this. This is usually something that is contained to the NFL. When LeVeon Bell did this and wanted to be the highest paid running back in football at the sake of breaking a pay record, I hated him for it. I still don't like the guy because I think it's a scummy thing to do. It's a scummy thing to do to be like, I'm only going to be getting offered $14 million instead of 17 or whatever, however much you wanted. So I'm not going to play with the rest of my team and I'm going to sit with a grumpy face on the sidelines. Dude, you're doing this at the expense of your team. And if Blake Snell does not play this season, he's doing it at the expense of his teammates. He's one of the best pitchers on the roster. Not having him in the rotation is going to be a big handicap for the Rays, and I'm sure he's not going to be getting many respect points from his teammates. He's actually making more money than 23 other of his teammates on the roster. He's the third highest paid player on the Rays. There are 14 people on the Rays. I checked on SpotTrack. 14 people that are making around, I think it's definitely under $1 million, and there's a bunch making only $500,000, and they have to take a pay cut. You don't see those guys going on Twitch and complaining about how they're not making enough when they're still projected to have around like a $3.5 million salary. So this is, I think, why people are having so many problems with Snell, and I understand that. But then again, it's also not fair to compare him to LeVeon Bell, because the thing about LeVeon Bell is he didn't have a contract. So he was being offered an amount that he thought was below him, and he didn't want to be franchise tagged. So when he was franchise tagged, he said, nah, I'm not playing for you, and sat out while his team was forced to, scramble to try and put together a good season. The difference with Snell is that Snell was already offered a contract. He's not complaining about, oh, I'm not getting enough money. And also the thing is like, the MLB is different than the NFL, because the NFL is the franchise tag, and their contracts are not fully guaranteed. That's the thing about the MLBs. Their contracts are fully guaranteed, meaning when a team signs a contract with you, they are obligated to give you the amount of money that they promised in the contract. So I understand where Snell is getting a lot of these frustrations from. So yes, I do think that taking a 50% pay cut is ridiculous. Like, I could understand if it's like, okay, like, we're gonna give you a 50% pay cut now, but we'll add on, like, let's say like they take that pay cut now and they add it on to their like future salaries. Like, for example, if you have a guy on a 5-year deal and you give him a pay cut, you're gonna add that pay cut incrementally to his contract year after year. So let's say you did a cut of $3 million. You're gonna do, let's say he has 3 more years on his contract or whatever. You're gonna give him an extra $1 million per year, to make up for that pay cut. That I think would be fair. But to my knowledge, I don't know of anything that is in this deal that allows for that. So I have to go on the side of the players this time. However, I think this goes to show that, like, without fans paying ridiculously high, ticket prices, these contracts are not affordable. And I still don't understand why owners are agreeing to pay them. You have to kind of fight back against agents and sort of into this sort of thing. And like, for example, with Dallas Keuchel and Craig Kimbrell, which, by the way, were still 2 solid pitchers who did not deserve to be free agents for that long. I do think still that fight back was necessary, because Keuchel wanted like $15 million a year, and he hadn't been putting up like Cy Young stats for a few years at that point. Still a good pitcher, but he definitely wasn't an ace anymore. And as for Kimbrell, I don't even know what amount of money he was offering, but I mean, I didn't see anything. I mean, he had a little bit of struggles towards the postseason. I think he was probably the only weakness on the Red Sox the year they won the World Series. But, I don't understand why those 2 guys didn't get signed, apart from maybe that they were asking for too much money and owners were finally like, nah, I can't give you that. Anyways, that's my opinions on the Blake Snell situation. I figured I would weigh in just to get my opinion out there, as I'm going to be releasing the other contract video after this one. This clears that up. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about the Blake Snell situation. Do you think that players shouldn't be, getting any money taken away from them? Do you agree with my idea that, we'll just add the money incrementally onto the rest of their contracts? Like, we'll pay you after when we do have the money and when income is coming back in? Just let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching another episode of Nonsensical Talks. See you in the next one. Bye, everybody.